may have noticed, last week there was no Cosplay Kitchen. That's because my husband and I were off exploring the town I grew up in Deutschland. So, this week, we're going to be making some of my favorite German recipes, and who better to cosplay for that than a St. Pauli girl? Today on the Cosplay Kitchen, we'll be making a traditional German pretzel, Spaetzle, and a beer drink I had growing up, but nowadays is just a great summer spritzer. For the pretzels, you'll need 1½ tablespoons of active dry yeast, 1 tablespoon of honey, 1½ cups of whole wheat flour, 3 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of sea salt, 2 large eggs, and 1½ cups of warm water. Combine the yeast, warm water, and honey, and whisk gently. Let that stand for about 5 minutes until it becomes frothy and foamy. After 5 minutes, your yeast should be nice and foamy. If it doesn't look like mine, check the expiration date on the packaging. If that's not the problem, you may have used water that was too hot or not warm enough. In a large bowl, add all of the flour, your yeast mixture, and 1 egg. I'll be using a stand mixer to mix mine. If you don't have one, a wooden spoon will work great too. It'll just take you a little bit longer. Try to avoid hand mixers because they don't have enough power to knead your dough into the proper consistency. Using the dough hook on a low speed, begin to knead the dough. After about 30 seconds, add your second egg. If your dough looks a little dry, don't worry, just add another tablespoon of water to help it come together. Once a dough ball forms, turn off the mixer and dump the ball out onto a lightly floured surface. Next, knead the dough for about 5 minutes. Be careful not to add too much flour or over-knead the dough, as this will result in a pretzel that is way too tough and chewy. In kneading, make sure that you don't stretch or tear the dough, as this will break up the gluten fibers which are needed to make bread. After you finish kneading, round off the ball and return it to the bowl that you mixed it in, that you've lightly coated with oil. Roll the dough ball around so that it is also coated with oil. Cover and let sit in a warm place for about an hour. While the pretzel dough is rising, we'll make our Spaetzle. Now, Spaetzle is a German pasta dish which is often confused in the States with Schnitzel, which is a breaded pork dish. Equally delicious, but not what we're making today. So, for our Spaetzle, you'll need 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 of 3/4 of a cup of milk, or 1/4 plus 1/8 of a cup of milk, and 1 egg. If you want, you can flavor your Spaetzle. We'll be flavoring ours today with 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of rosemary. Feel free to use any of the spices in your spice cabinet. Stir together with a wooden spoon, and you'll be left with something that resembles very thick cake batter. To cook the Spaetzle, you'll need a pot of lightly salted boiling water and a colander. Traditionally, you would force the dough through a Spaetzle hex, but not everybody has one of those, so a colander will work just as well. If you don't have a large colander, anything with pea-sized holes will do the trick. When your water comes to a boil, place your slotted apparatus over the pot. I'll be using a large skimmer today. While holding it over the pot, you'll add a little bit of dough and gently force it through with either a spoon or a pastry scraper. The Spaetzle is going to drop down into the boiling water where it'll cook just like pasta. The ones that rise to the top are the ones that are done. That's about what it'll look like. As they finish, gently skim off the ones that are done and place them in a bowl. Add a little bit of butter to your bowl or olive oil to keep them from sticking together. Repeat the process until you're out of dough. Spaetzle can be served two different ways, either right out of the pot or lightly sautéed. I prefer mine sautéed. So, in a saucepan, add some butter and quickly your Spaetzle. Continue to toss gently until the Spaetzle begins to turn golden brown. By the way, your pretzel dough should look like that. Continue to gently toss the Spaetzle until it's golden brown all over. Place into a bowl and set it aside. For the pretzels, preheat your oven to 425 degrees. Back to our pretzels. The first thing we want to do is make a dipping solution. This is made with 2 cups of warm water and 3 tablespoons of baking soda. We'll dip the pretzels in this, and this will give them a nice golden brown color. By now, our pretzel dough will have doubled in size. Turn it out onto a gently floured surface and pat it down to relieve the excess air. Today, we'll be making 2 different things with our pretzel dough. First, we'll be making a classic German pretzel, and second, we'll be making a filled pretzel. Let's start with the pretzel. Cut off a section of your dough, depending on how big you want your pretzel to be, and gently roll it out like a snake. Careful not to pull too hard, as that will break the dough. Bring the dough up into a U shape, twist right over left, and pinch the ends. Ta-da! Dip the pretzel in the baking soda solution and lay it out on a sheet pan. Next, we'll make our filled pretzel. Cut off another section of dough and gently flour your work surface. With a floured rolling pin, roll out the dough to about a 5-inch width. Then choose your fillings. I'll be using cheese, pepperoni, and a little bit of Dijon mustard. Make sure to keep the filling towards the center, otherwise the edges won't seal properly. Use a little bit of the baking soda mixture along the edge of the pretzel. Then, gently roll. Press down to create a seal, and do the same on the other side. Pinch the ends. At this point, you have a couple different options. You can twirl it into a pretzel, or cut it into logs to make tiny appetizers. We'll leave ours as a pretzel. Carefully lift it and dip it into the baking soda mixture, and place it on the sheet pan. Make sure your filled pretzel and your unfilled pretzel are kept separate, as the filled pretzel will take longer to cook. Bake your pretzels for about 8 to 10 minutes, or until they're golden brown. While those are baking, we'll work on our summer beer spritzer. Growing up in Germany, it wasn't uncommon to see children out with their parents enjoying alcohol. That's not to mean they were throwing back hard liquor, but to enjoy a sip of wine or a small glass of beer with a meal was totally acceptable. A popular drink was to mix a light-colored soda, such as Sprite or ginger ale, with beer, which is what we'll be doing today. So, for this recipe, you'll need 2 cups of light soda. I'll be using lemon lime. And about a cup of beer. Look for a pale ale, a Hefeweizen, or even a light lager, as those make the best spritzers. You won't have to stir, because the bubbles do that for you. And that's all there is to it. As you can see, I garnished my Spaetzle with a little bit of sour cream and chives. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cosplay Kitchen. And remember, St. Pauli girl, put her on a pedestal or a coaster. Prost!
I went downtown today, met a girl on the way. She asked me why I looked so lonely. As she changed her wig, my heart danced a jig. Think I found my one and only. Now you're gone, I moved on. Someone who understands. I got a new cosplay girlfriend. She's fun and she's better than you.